Hey guys, my name is Sunday Nwogoro, a software developer at Andela, Lagos. I help young developers to improve their technical skills. In this video series, we are going to be solving React related issues. So let's get started. Today we'll be looking at React lifecycle. This diagram shows the complete flow of React lifecycle. From every initialization of React component, it goes through this flow before it renders or before it is visible to the user. The first thing React does is it gets the default prop and sets the initial state. Then if these two are successful, it calls the component will mount. Then before it hits the render method. Then after the render method has been called, then it will call component did mount. So each of these methods are just like listeners or something that you can override to change the behavior of each step in the life cycle of a React component. Now, when you call set states, after the component is rendered, when you call set states, it goes through another life cycle, and that is why the documentation advise that we use set state instead of modifying states uh, directly. So when you call set state, it goes through this life cycle by calling the component should update. If this method returns true, it will proceed to will update. If it returns false, it will end the life cycle at that particular instance. So this component should update. Simply, you can use this to validate the current state and the previous state and see if the update should proceed. So component will update will only be called if this returns true, and once this is called, the next thing is to hit the render method again. So render method will always be called whenever a component state changes. So after the new render, then it calls component did update. Now this one is called if a component is updated, that is the state of a component is changed, but component did mount is called when a component is successfully initialized and rendered to the user for the first time. But this one is called when the rendered component actually gets updated, and that's when it goes through this life cycle. So let's quickly look at a prepared demo to show how this really works practically. I've prepared a file called header.js, which will represent a header part of our application, and I have implemented all the life cycles. So only thing I have there is just a log to show us the hierarchy and the flow of the life cycles. So let's run this in our browser and see. So here is the test app, but let's inspect element to look at the console. So you can see the flow here. First calls the default prop, then followed by the initial state, then it calls component will mount, then it calls the render method, and finally the did mount. So I've also added a button here to test state changes. If I click on don't change value, if you look at the flow here, it calls should update, then and that's the end. It was unable to update anything in the view because if you look at the implementation here, it says if a call should update, if the test value is wrong, return false, else return true. So because this returned false, it was unable to call will update. But if I call the actual change value, you can see my component here is changed to a new value. And if you look at the flow, it calls the should update, then it hits will update and render and updated So which is the life cycle of what we've seen here. So this one is a deciding factor, must return true or false, and before it's able to proceed down to the next hierarchy. If you look at this one in here, it says React create class is deprecated. Is because I'm using this format for my header.js. It says this is deprecated, but why I use this is because get default prompt and get initial state only works in this format, and how you can achieve this same thing using the accepted formats right now. We'll take a look at header2.js to see that format. So here we use the constructor to set our initial state and probably bind some of the methods to the current context. One of the benefits of using this format is that we don't have to, do the binding stuff, and we can immediately use this within the method. But if we're using this particular syntax, we have to bind our events handlers. Okay, so this is how to implement the method. All you have to do is define them, and React we call them. So let's use this in our app.js. So if we uncomment this and take out this and change this on to header 2. Once you save this, reload my browser. The warning is gone, and it calls the constructor which sets the initial state, and you can also do other initialization in the constructor. Then it calls will mount, rendered, and did mount. The same thing if we call don't change value, it calls should update but wouldn't proceed, and we call change value and it goes the same life cycle. So that is it. If you have any question, drop a comment below. Yes, let's see in the next lesson.